Now, before we start this video, I want to remind you of something. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of excellent horror movies featuring phenomenal monsters and scenarios that would fit perfectly into the SCP universe. Just putting that out there, seeing as we're not likely getting any official, cohesive, cinematic universe-style SCP audiovisual content anytime soon. You know, because of Creative Commons and the magic of the internet. But wouldn't it be cool? So, in the meanwhile, let's talk about the top 5 SCPs that need to be in a horror movie part 2. Coming in at number 5, we got SCP-173. How could you not make a horror movie featuring the OG? This thing is terror incarnate and has all of the features required for an excellent cinematic monster. However, you've got to be extra careful while creating anything featuring this entity. A lot of folks have lost a lot of blood, sweat, and tears while figuring out how to use the original image without causing a copyright nightmare. Just a heads up, the original image that folks connect to 173 is a sculpture by Izumi Kato. It existed before SCP and wasn't meant to be associated with a killer creature that only moves when you're not looking at it. So, be respectful when creating stuff featuring the iconic image. It's not under Creative Commons like everything else. Folks learned that lesson fast. Right, horror movies. 173 is a shoo-in for spookiest, scariest sculpture, as it has some very deadly attributes. They've been played out in countless video games, short films, and tales throughout the wiki. It's a pretty simple concept, especially by today's wiki standards, but there's some great efficacy in that simplicity. It's a strange figure composed of concrete and spray paint that stands in the corner of a room, seemingly unmoving. The floor of its enclosure is covered in a mixture of feces and blood, which has to be cleaned up regularly. If someone has eyes on this, it won't move. But if it's unobserved, even for a second, it can move freely. It doesn't teleport or anything, but boy does it move quickly. And if it manages to get close enough to a person, it'll snap their neck in an instant. Ouch. It's like a weeping angel meets SCP meets terrifying sculpture. A combination made in horror heaven. A short film would serve this concept well, with someone finding themselves in a containment cell and not knowing exactly what's going on. They realize that every time they look away from the sculpture, they can hear scraping noises, and it gets a little closer to them. By the time they figure out exactly what's going on, it is too late. Snap. Alternatively, someone could try to make a feature-length flick about it, maybe delving into some sort of origin story as it makes its way out of containment and into the world at large. There could be some sort of goal that it needs to accomplish, maybe revenge that needs to be exacted. However, a lot of the appeal and allure of this SCP comes from the fact that it's so mysterious. So while making a deep dive movie might seem like a lot of fun, it could end up killing some of the scary magic. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-1111. It's been a while since we got some honest-to-goodness dog-centric horror. Cujo freaked out an entire generation and is probably the worst thing to ever happen to St. Bernards. Other than that, scary dogs seem to play similar roles in horror media. You've got your zombie dogs and COD, werewolves and werewolf adjacents and all sorts of stuff, and maybe some bits where pet dogs go crazy or missing during a haunting. I don't know if it's because in the age of the internet, cute dogs have totally taken over, and to have anyone imply that their precious little puppy could ever be scary would be akin to slapping them in the face and calling their pet a murderous cur, but that could be it. Folks get protective of their four-legged friends. That might mean that it's the perfect time to subvert some expectations and make a really scary horror movie with a killer dog in it. That means it's time for SCP-1111. This is one loyal pup for sure. There are 2 components that make up this SCP. SCP-1111-1 is some sort of lab shepherd mix and keeps a very tight perimeter around its master. 1111-2 is that master, a man in business attire hung from a tree. The closer our canine companion is to this man, the more he violently jerks around and makes choking sounds. Lovely. Also worth noting, the dog gets smaller and less violent the further away from the hanged man it gets. However, at a certain distance, the dog will always clue in and return to the tree. If anyone tries to get close to the hanged man, the dog will violently attack them. It's been seen easily surpassing all the physical abilities of a regular dog, from running up to 60 kilometers per hour to biting through 15mm titanium plating. Needless to say, you do not want to be targeted by this guard dog. It could work really well in a movie. Let's say there's a group of people camping, and one of them recently lost their dog. Lifelong pals, man's best friend, so this person is taking it pretty hard. Then, lo and behold, there's a seemingly stray dog in the woods. It's pretty small and manageable, but very defensive and a little violent. Maybe if they took it to a vet and got it cleaned up, it would calm down and warm up to them. However, it runs off before they can try and feed it, so they pursue it into the woods. Bad call, because as they get deeper and deeper, this dog increases in size and power. It starts killing campers off, while they all believe that it's a different different creature, and that the original smaller dog is still somewhere out there. The dog lover in the group refuses to leave the poor thing in the woods while that beast is running around, ironically unaware that they're actually the same creature. It's all coming together. Coming in at number 3, pattern screamers. Here's my attempt at putting together some Lovecraftian, cosmic SCP movie horror. It's always difficult to adapt for the big screen, but it's worth a shot. See, the pattern screamers are tough to describe. Without getting too deep into it, they're essentially some sort of consciousness woven into the universe itself, screaming out in terror constantly. Why are they screaming? What does this cosmic mind know that we don't? Do we want to find out? It's not easy to answer, but if you go looking for these answers, you might end up losing your marbles. Folks who encounter pattern screamers tend to come away with heightened levels of dread, unease, and anxiety, usually culminating in the ending of one's own life. These are beings that at one point have annihilated entire civilizations, so if they've turned their attention towards Earth, we're probably cooked. To me, they sort of feel like encounters with Yogg-Sothoth, akin to the Dunwich Horror, or maybe even something similar to The Color Out of Space. Mind-melting discoveries abound, pattern screamers would make for a wonderfully woeful mindfuck of a horror movie. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-432. Many SCPs are so much more than they seem on the surface. This is especially true when looking at SCP-432. Outwardly appearing to be a steel storage locker only a few meters wide, there is an entire labyrinth inside of it. Folks who step in will find themselves in a series of expansive hallways composed of rusted metal, lined with pipes and lit by flickering light bulbs. The actual extent of this maze of hallways has yet to be measured, as people who go in do not often come out alive, and any sort of technology used to map the interior malfunctions within moments of being activated. On many expeditions inside 432, remains of the previous test subjects have been found. A lot of the time it appears as though starvation did them in. However, some remains suggest that there is some sort of carnivorous predator that stalks the halls as well. So let's get this straight. There's a storage locker that transports people to an anomalous labyrinth of rusted metal and unreliable light that cannot be accurately measured and almost invariably results in the death of all explorers, whether by starvation or monster. That's a horror movie right there. Need I explain more? And finally at number 1, SCP-049. The good old plague doctor, the mask-wearing, pestilence-sensing lunatic of a medical practitioner. 049 has dedicated its life to annihilating any sort of pestilence it comes across, usually by ending all biological functions in living beings it physically touches. This quest to end pestilence doesn't seem to have an endpoint though, as 049 never seems satisfied with its work. It will perform crude surgery on its victims, usually to no avail, but sometimes it brings them back from the dead as mindless automatons. To most, this is an atrocity, an affront to human life, but to SCP-049, it's a cure. Movies about mad scientists have been done before, but this offers up a new spin on the classic tale. Imagine being responsible for watching over an eccentric character like this, but assuming he's just a lunatic, and then all of a sudden one day he brings something back to life. Do you investigate the miracle further, or stay just where you are? Of course, at some point the good doctor would have to escape, leaving piles of autopsied corpses and zombie folk in his wake. Lots of opportunities for body horror, excessive gore, and dark humor. Who wouldn't want to see this? Somebody start writing up the IMDb details. These are surefire horror wins. So much potential, so little time. Ah well, maybe someday we'll see them come to life. For now, we can watch fan films on YouTube and keep reading entries on the wiki. So, what'd you think of the list? Do you agree with my picks? What SCP do you want to see in a movie? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more freaky ones from the top 5 newest Trevor Henderson Creatures 2021 Part 4. Just Gotcha says, here during the premiere, and holy crap, I keep forgetting how scary some of the stuff Trevor Henderson's creatures are. But how do you forget? Oh well, I'm glad you made it to the premiere though. It's every Wednesday, folks. Drago Wolfraven says, damn, this guy is an amazing monster artist, winky face. You know it. Lynn Durbin says, I love Trevor's entries. I have several shirts with his creations. Outstanding. Which designs did you get? Error Mouse says, if I worked the night shift and saw that thing, I would ignore it unless if it needed help. How could you be able to focus on your job with something like that hanging around? Filet Gumbo says, Garfield. Lazaga. And Yellow AVM Shorts says, you will scared in the scary Trevot Henderson. Yeah, man. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm gonna go hide in the trash compactor as a prank. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Folks who encounter pattern screamers usually come away with heightened levels of dread, unease, and anxiety, usually culminating in ending of one's on many expeditions inside of 432. On many different expeditions inside of 432,